Hello, friends. Welcome to the SIPS series. These foundational strategies were nominated by listeners. They told me these are the ideas in the podcast that truly made a difference for them. So I distilled them down into short, actionable insights. There's not going to be any fluff or complex jargon, just practical, real-world diabetes management that you can start applying today. And I know your time is valuable, so we're keeping these short. Another small sip will come out once a week for the foreseeable future. If you like what you hear, check out the Pro Tip series or the Bold Beginnings series for more. Those series are available in the menu at juiceboxpodcast.com, and you can find complete lists of all of the series in the featured tab on the private Facebook group. Please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. The questions you have, I guarantee you, there's answers to them in the Juicebox Podcast, and it's all free. Jenny, apparently in episode 366, 260, and 693, I have said the message is trust will happen. The problem is that the first time I said it, I remember this as clear as day, because as I was speaking it into the microphone, I thought, ooh, that's an incredibly awkward way to say something. But I just kept going with it. And I think the way I say it is trust that what you know is going to happen is going to happen. And again, I could probably just go to ChatGPT, put that sentence in and say, please tell me 10 better ways to say this. But I think you have to trust that things that you have seen in certain situations and they repeat, if you trust that they're going to happen, then suddenly you can have just a half a juice box to stop below, or you can bolus 3 extra units than this thing says because you know that this food needs more insulin, like that kind of example.
And if this wasn't the case, we wouldn't have smart features in especially our pumping systems that allow us to set something like a temporary basal or an adjusted, override or something like that. I mean, if this wasn't the case, I wouldn't have an override that I set when I take my long runs on the weekends. It wouldn't work. It would be wrong every time. And I'd be frustrated, but I know what's going to happen because I've done it before enough. And so I trust that my setting adjustment is going to make the difference.
So I'm digging around here. Nico, who is a group expert in the Facebook group, has been on
I love Nico. She's awesome.
Really wonderful. She's been on one of the episodes of the podcast too. But she actually did screenshots for me of where I said these things in the podcast, which is awesome. And I'm looking at it, and it turns out that when I said this, I was talking about stopping a low blood sugar.
Oh.
Because it was part of a bigger episode where Arden had experienced a pretty significant low as a young kid. And I gave her, a bunch of carbs to fix it. And once it was fixed and she was stable and these couple of minutes passed by, and I saw the arrow on her CGM swing up. And even though she was like 55 and rising, this was not a situation where anybody would intuitively say, it's probably time for insulin. But I knew how many carbs I had given her, and I knew she was going to end up being 300 if I didn't do something. And so I didn't bolus carb for carb, but I just kind of randomly in the middle of the night was like, I think I'm going to bolus for like 2/3 of the carbs. And I bolused. And I remember feeling that feeling when I pushed the button, like, I have to trust that this is going to happen. It always happens like this. She gets low. I give her too much. She gets high. It ruins the rest of the day. I know this is going to happen. I know it is. I know it is. I know it is. But the problem is the pushing the button. Like, you know what I mean? Because what if this is the one time
that it's not needed?
It doesn't happen, right? And so it turns out that was in that conversation about that topic. But over the years of the podcast, I think the reason people go back to it isn't about correcting a low. I think it's about everything. I think it's about pre-bolusing a meal, or that the fat from a French fry is going to come get you an hour from now, like, or all the other things that seem unknowable about diabetes until you see them happen a couple of times. And then the truth is, if you can remove your fear, then they are knowable. And so I think you should trust that what you know is going to happen is going to happen.
And also it takes, as you've been saying, it takes a little bit of history of doing things, right? This is not necessarily for the 1 week newbie who is still having fluctuations and adjusting doses and in honeymoon stage and whatever. You can still learn in that phase what seems to work, but understand that a lot of things will need adjustment, especially for kids, will need adjustment. And once you learn what is working, again, you have to trust that it's going to keep working until, it's not enough anymore. So now I need to change something.
Diabetes, it surprises me in a lot of ways. And one of them here is that I was putting myself back in that situation so I could talk about it. And I'm crying now.
Aww.
So, but yeah, it's not like Arden didn't get low on her first day and I gave her like 60 carbs and I was like, I'm bolusing. This was woo. It wasn't like that. It was,
let's give it a try.
She was 8, 9 years old. She had had diabetes for 7 years. And I stopped the low. I've got all that adrenaline from the low, and like, it was one of them, like test a minute later, like, like you're not going to die. Right. Like that kind of like horror. And then it was over and I knew she was okay. And then I was just hit like with the other side of it. I'm like, oh my God, her blood sugar is going to go up to 300. Like, it's going to be like, I gave her too much. Like, and I didn't give her too much. In the moment, she needed it all because she was falling like a stone. I did not know why, right? And Arden hasn't had maybe 5 of those lows in her whole life. But if you have diabetes and you think they're not going to happen, you're out of your mind. Because Jenny will tell you a story about her sitting on the floor in a store. So then it happened, and I had to like this thing that we now talk about in the podcast, like it's an idea that people use, and it is. It really reflects on a moment in my life where I had to force myself to believe that. In a dark room at like 2:00 in the morning. And the problem is that when I put myself back in that spot so I could explain it to you, I continued on into when I got out in the hallway and like fell apart afterwards.
How you feel.
Yeah. No, I cried in the hallway a lot. Anyway, it's not that easy, but once you have the information, and it really happens over and over again, if you can learn to trust it, I think it changes a lot about diabetes, maybe life too, but definitely diabetes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now I'm all upset.
Thanks for sharing.
No, you're welcome. If you or a loved one was just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and you're looking for some fresh perspective, the Bold Beginnings series from the Juicebox Podcast is a terrific place to start. That series is with myself and Jenny Smith. Jenny is a CDCES, a registered dietitian, and a type 1 for over 35 years. And in the Bold Beginnings series, Jenny and I are going to answer the questions that most people have after a type 1 diabetes diagnosis. The series begins at episode 698 in your podcast player, or you can go to juiceboxpodcast.com and click on Bold Beginnings in the menu. Are you starting to see patterns, but you can't quite make sense of them? You're like, oh, if I bolus here, this happens, but I don't know what to do. Should I put in a little less, a little more? If you're starting to have those thoughts, if you're starting to think, this isn't going the way the doctor said it would, I think I see something here, but I can't be sure. Once you're having those thoughts, you're ready for the Diabetes Pro Tip series from the Juicebox Podcast. It begins at episode 1000. You can also find it at juiceboxpodcast.com up in the menu, and you can find a list in the private Facebook group. Just check right under the featured tab at the top. It'll show you lists of a ton of stuff, including the Pro Tip series, which runs from episode 1000 to 1025. I can't thank you enough for listening. Please make sure you're subscribed or following in your audio app. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.